In today's video, I'll share with you what I know about prion diseases, why I think this is a dog culture issue. So, as we look at some of this information, one of the important things to understand is prion diseases have a long incubation period, taking years to show up. So, what that means is you can have a lot of symptoms that aren't necessarily able to be linked to prion disease, but then you suddenly die, and then it can be finally diagnosed because they have to pull spinal fluid or do a biopsy of your brain. So, 30 years according to this source right here, and see what it says right here, 30-year latency period. So this can be going on in your brain at 10, 15 years old, and 20, 30 years later, you can suddenly die from this. It's like dementia and stuff like that. So let's look at another source here. And so according to this article, people that have found to have died from this, these are some of the symptoms that are present in their history with dysphoria, withdrawal, anxiety, insomnia, loss of interest, neurological symptoms. So this article investigates CJD, prion disease. This is all similar to mad cow disease. It's a folded protein that gets into your blood-brain barrier. In almost all cases of it right now, they're calling it sporadic. See this word sporadic? It's because they can't link it to anything directly, like genetics or family history and stuff like that. So I just wanted to show you those two things because that's important to understand as we look at all this. Okay, so this is something that's on the rise. It's rare. They call it rare, but it's universally fatal. But it's been getting worse and worse. Prion disease rising in the USA. We recently had this happen in Oregon, and that's what got me to start looking at this more. So it's a chronic wasting disease. Also, it's caused by prions. And the reason I'm talking about chronic wasting disease is because deer are a big part of this. A lot of deer have this chronic wasting disease, and just like with cattle, just like with the mad cow disease, it's affecting their brain in the same way. You notice right here what it says: spongiform. This little blue highlight that I have over here, spongiform. They call it that because basically it turns your brain into a sponge. It just becomes like empty holes, and then all of the neurological problems, finally at your end days, it's like you have massive dementia and muscle tremors and other stuff, and it kills you rapidly. It's universally fatal. And the same thing with the bovine spongiform. It's the same thing. It's mad cow disease, commonly known as mad cow disease. It's a fatal brain disease in cattle from misfolded proteins called prions. So I believe that these prions are being spread all over the place because of dogs and feces and flies. And so let me show you guys some stuff about that. So these misfolded proteins, they can be transmitted through fecal matter among infected animals. All right, so fecal matter. What creature out there that is everywhere in our domestic life, even out in the woods, even on the farms, is constantly putting its nose and feet into fecal matter and transporting that all over the place? It's domestic dogs. And so dogs have these in their bodies. However, canids are highly resistant to these. So canines do have a lot of weird strokes and seizures, like fly snapping seizure, because of their brains. But according to almost everything that I can find, this disease is increasing in all types of animals and humans, but they can't prove or find that it's in dogs as of right now. But so as this says, Dogs have the prions in their bodies, but they're not known to develop diseases like other animals do. And these are just some of the sources that um, indicate this. So these dogs can be exposed to it. They run into the woods, they mess around with deer feces, and then they jump back in your car. Crooked River Ranch, Oregon, had a huge outbreak of this a while back, and that place has a lot of domestic dogs that run around and contact deer because the people that live there have a lot of dogs, and it's right in the middle of deer migrating areas by the Crooked River in Oregon. So so it's interesting that the dogs have the proteins, but they're not affected by them. Okay, and so what comes with dog feces? Flies. Everywhere we go, if you go to the park and people actually pick up their dog shit, there will be flies all around the wastebasket. Anywhere there's a pile of dog shit, there's a dozen flies. And where do those flies go? They're going to your picnic table, they're landing on your car. If you got yourself a sweet roast beef sandwich from, your mom or dad or Subway, you're sitting there trying to eat it. Here come these freaking flies. And where were those flies? They were over there on that dog shit. And where were those dogs? Those dogs were probably harassing wildlife, deer. Um, yeah. As an example of this, I'm going to take you over to Google Maps for a minute. So we're looking at a park that is not far from Highway 97 in Oregon. So this park that I'm showing you, I visited this place a few times. This place is always full of dog feces, like all over the place. These little walking trails right here, there's some waste baskets. And if you walk by the waste baskets in the summertime, it's the dog feces bags thrown up against it and flies everywhere. Um, but if you go farther down Ashwood Road and then look over here, there are always herds of deer over here by the frisbee throwing golf, the disc golf place. And there's deer that will walk through this park right here and they'll graze on little shrubs and stuff like that. And so they're putting their droppings in the park. Anytime you see somebody walking a dog, they're all running around, stuffing their nose into that deer feces. And then they're leaving their feces, all over the park. And feces is a way that this spreads. It's a way that the animals can pick up the prions, the misfolded proteins, and gets them all over the place. And so this little park here that I'm talking about, this is kind of like Crooked River Ranch. It's filled with dogs, it's filled with deer, and it's filled with feces. Dog feces and flies. And another part of this, if you drive over here on Ashwood Drive, these houses over here, they have horses and cattle. So, the flies that are over here consuming dog feces from dogs that have prions in their body, they're flying over here, getting onto people's other types of domestic creatures. Backyard chickens that lay eggs, they're landing on your garden, and they're transporting these prions all over the place. And a big part of it is because the presence of dogs raises the amount of feces and flies. And this has been proven by CDC and other sources, but mammals spread it in their feces, as evidenced by studies showing that prions are excreted in the feces of infected animals like sheep and deer. Anywhere that there's a sheep or a deer and a dog can smell their feces, the dogs are always running up, shoving their nose in the feces or doing other types of interaction with that stuff. So now let's go to our NIH study. So check this out. So this study puts together all of the things that I just mentioned to you, but it's called prion dissemination through the environment. So let's just go to the pictures in here. So this study explains how these prions can live in the environment for a long period of time. Like this picture right here, here's the deer and the fly and the bird, and the urine and feces are excreted by the deer, and if the prions are in there, then they get spread, and it shows a coyote, a bird, there's the carcass of the deer. Those get into contact with these things, and they don't show pictures of the domestic dogs, but domestic dogs are always getting up on these type of animals. They see a deer carcass, and they run off in the woods. They're coming back with it in their mouth. Worms, all that kind of stuff. When dogs see those types of things out in the woods, they're always harassing them, shoving their nose right up in them. And then the dogs can get the prions in their bodies, not show any symptoms, and then excrete it in their feces everywhere else. Here's another picture that is like a summary of what they're explaining in this. But for example, here's an animal shedding the prions, and then they can stay on plants and rocks and other stuff like that for a long time. The folded proteins are very strong. It takes them a while to break down. And so, other animals can pick them up and have symptoms or not. And then, through that contact, they can get into a human. And how is this going to be facilitated? Most people don't like really hang out with domestic cats and rats when they're out at the park or anywhere else. But they're with dogs all the time. It's kind of funny they don't show a picture of domestic dogs. But dogs are they're constantly harassing wildlife and getting into people's farms and stuff like that. So this is a really long study, like all of these are. But you can look in here and do stuff like a keyword search, like Control F. This is what I do, and then type in like zoonotic. So zoonosis is a big part of this. It's transmission through animals. And so if you got a dog that can carry these proteins but not show symptoms, well, dogs are a perfect zoonotic pathway to get these prions. As you can see, plenty of zoonotic stuff. So I won't hassle you guys too much by looking through this article, but let's go to our next little lookup. And so this is just confirming, cattle and other livestock, dogs are constantly messing with them. And it's called a serious concern for farmers and ranchers. So if you have cattle that are shedding the prions, or perhaps the cattle don't have any of the prion disease, but here comes a dog that has been rummaging around in deer feces and goat feces and everything else it can run into, and then it runs into that livestock and takes a dump and spreads the feces particles all around. Yeah, a dog can easily, through zoonosis and through feces and flies, spread this disease. I mean, how can they not? They carry the prions. Mammal feces can spread it, flies can spread it, and flies and dogs and feces, it all goes hand in hand. And last but not least, I just want to show you this little article from Texas. So Texas is one of the worst places for stray dogs, and it's also one of the worst places for the prion disease in deer. So that's very interesting. I know that correlation is not causation, but remember, this disease takes a long time to show up. So if these deer and these deer breeders that are mentioned in this article are having such a problem with this, I mean, doesn't that mean we should at least be looking at these domestic dogs? So these people are deer breeders. So you would think, well, the deer are living inside of their facility and stuff. But what do people in Texas have themselves? They have domestic dogs that are always running all over the place, probably getting into contact with their stray dogs. So yeah, it's very interesting that Texas has one of the worst problems with this. So there you go. That's been a look at this prion disease that is supposed to be rare, but it gets worse and worse and worse. And it looks to me like domestic dogs can definitely help spread this to everybody and anything, because it's just like our little study here says. Those prions can be on surfaces for a long time. And what are dogs constantly licking and putting their saliva and effluvia on? Surfaces. And what are domestic dogs always getting into contact with? Feces and flies. So yeah, there you go. See you guys later. Stay away from dogs. They're gross.